It's that time in the show where we check in on the grain markets with our OSU agriculture economist, Dr. John Michael Riley. And John Michael, let's briefly talk wheat harvest. You know, it's about 98% finished, so talk what producers are seeing as we're kind of wrapping everything up.
Right, we're finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. In fact, the train's almost coming out of that tunnel. For the most part, it's still looking good.
Yeah.
Definitely the crop has deteriorated as the season has, the harvest season kind of continued to lag on. We dropped off in about 2 to 3 bushels per acre through late June. Now we're another 2 to 3 bushels below that. So somewhere in the mid 50s overall state average is what we're looking, what we're expecting. So overall, it's still been a good harvest, but just not what we probably could have been had the rains not continued to fall.
Yeah, and those rains, keeping it's really, the crop suffered a little bit too as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, dropped off, overall about 4 to 6 bushels per acre. That's state average, so some individuals probably worse than others. But overall, it certainly, I would say this, it certainly could have been worse given the level of rainfall that we received over the heavy harvest period.
So let's switch to summer crops right now. What are you hearing in regards to just how prices are looking for those three commodity crops that we have?
Well, unfortunately, still lots of pressure in our summer crop grain markets, oilseed markets. Started to see a little bit of a bump toward the end of last week. Some news of tremendous heat, some stress on the crop. Also, just some political news coming through that was providing some lift. And all of that came to stop over the weekend. We got some rains across most of the Corn Belt through the weekend. Still some pressure there, I think, but those rains did provide some pressure as we started this week, and that's continuing as we're having our conversation right now.
And so with those rains, that was primarily not really in Oklahoma, but that was more in the Midwest, in the upper Midwest, like in Ohio as well, right?
Yeah, this is more just me speaking nationally about the corn crop across the Corn Belt. Some rains fell over the weekend, and that reduced that possibility of continued stress. We're still in this critical growing stage, so that's still going to be something that the market's going to monitor. But the rains over the weekend kind of did away with all of that upward momentum that we were seeing at the end of last week.
What about cotton?
Cotton's doing a similar story. Overall, nationally, all of our summer crops are looking really good. Good to excellent ratings are very high. Crop progress is pretty much on track. Obviously not here in the state. Here in the state, we're about 5 to 8 percentage points behind where we typically are at because of all those rains that we received. But nationally, everything's kind of opposite of that. It's looking really good, and that's providing some pressure. No different for cotton. We're also seeing some lower oil prices. The good news is that the dollar is weakening a little bit, which sometimes provides a little bit of a boost, but for the most part, cotton's a similar story to all of our other summer crops.
So that's nationally. How are prices looking for those summer crops in the state?
Well, again, similar story, some pressure there. But spoke in the spring about basis. That's continuing to be something I'm monitoring. We've got tremendous weakness in basis for soybeans, 50 cents to $1 below where we typically are at with basis for soybeans. Much weaker than usual. That's continuing to be an issue. Not nearly as bad with corn. We're right around 25 to 50 cents below average with regard to basis. So corn prices in the state are high 3s, low 4s. Soybean prices, low 9s to mid 9s for the most part with regard to those two crops. Cotton prices somewhere in that 65 to 70 cent range, kind of hovering around 67 cents a pound.
All right, thanks, John Michael. Dr. John Michael Riley, OSU agriculture economist here at Oklahoma State University.